From the point of view of a perspective, the primary did not turn out the way perhaps we had hoped or even thought that it was for the first few months of the voting. But we're at where we're at. And so the new question is, what should the left be doing to move the country to where it needs to be? And there are a few people I can think of better suited to help us come to grips with the situation we're in than the executive director of the Justice Democrats, Alexandria Rojas. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Very glad to have you on. I've very much appreciated over the past bit your contributions, to cable news. It's the sort of voice that we don't often hear. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit more later on. But I've been wondering, since you and Justice Democrats have been so important in helping to propel the left forward electorally over the past few years. It looks like Bernie is not going to be the nominee now. And so I'm curious, what are some of your just general thoughts about how this has affected the fight on the left and where we go from here?
Yeah. Well, first, I want to. It's not great to not win. It doesn't feel good, and so I know that we're still all going through our own process on sort of this moment, not just with what's happening at the presidential, right, but sort of the context that we're in, given the pandemic, given millions of people losing their jobs, and obviously all of us, our friends, families being affected by that. So first and foremost, I think there's that. But in terms of where we go from here, what do progressives do now that Bernie is not going to be at the top of the ticket? And as executive director of Justice Democrats, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that all of the work that we've been doing. Yes, we've been wanting to get Bernie Sanders elected. We want to defeat Donald Trump, but it's also really critical for us to pay attention to what's happening in Congress. And we can see right now, in light of the pandemic, how critical it is that we elect a new generation of leaders that are going to fight like hell to center poor and working people, because they're getting left behind in all of the legislation and from where it could be. So I think that, one thing for progressives to think about, especially as we think about not just in November, but in the long term, is how do we build a bench of leaders in Congress who are going to really hold the line on critical issues like the ones that we're facing right now, but the ones that we know we're going to be facing in the future. So there's progressives like Jamal Bowman, who are running out in New York's 16th district. He's going up against someone like Elliot Engel, who's a corporate Democrat, where I think that we have, a small amount of volunteer energy, a small amount of small dollars compared to the presidential race, where there's hundreds of millions, right, being spent. These races, we can really turn the needle and build out what we're seeing with what the squad is being effective in doing right now.
I think 100%. So if there are some people watching this maybe that identify as progressives and feel a little bit deflated about the prospect of a Biden presidency, you think that perhaps channeling some of their energy into these lower races might be a good way to move forward then?
I think that is a good way. I think it's important for us to recognize what's at stake right now. We have to defeat having a Donald Trump as president is going to set us back in terms of our ability as a movement to just, be able to respond to this moment where we're having to basically fight to keep what we have right now. That is not that would be a different environment under a Joe Biden administration. And so to look forward to holding a Joe Biden administration accountable, we should focus our efforts on Congress as we also seek to defeat Donald Trump, but really, really start as progressives to focus on where we can build legislative power to actualize the political revolution that Bernie is talking about, that all of us are fighting for, to be able to, see these things within our lifetime.
So it sounds like you believe that potentially Biden could be pressured in some areas. I'm curious, what are some of the topics that you think perhaps strategically are worthy of the most attention, that he's perhaps more easily able to be moved on? And are there any areas that you think that it's unlikely that progressives are going to be able to move him?
Well, I think that we have to be really clear right now. Joe Biden has sent a number of signals to what he thinks of progressive priorities when it comes to Medicare for all. I don't expect Joe Biden to move on an issue like that. And I think we recently put out a letter alongside a number of other Gen Z, millennial groups, basically calling on Joe Biden to adopt a number of policy positions, a number of personnel decisions. And the reason why we tried to lay that out is really make the case for why he needs to earn the votes of our generation, but pretty much everyone under the age of 45, if he wants to be able to defeat Donald Trump. And the reason why we harped especially on personnel is because we know that personnel is policy. And when you see him presenting folks like Larry Summers, it's extremely, extremely problematic. So we're going to continue to up the pressure. And I think our ability right now to put pressure through that letter and through other means on Joe Biden on very, very specific measures. There's even certain policies where on healthcare, like he can move right now. And so there's groups like us and Sunrise that are working to continue to keep up the pressure, especially for the rest of the primary.
So it seems pretty clear that he's not going to be any sort of leader for the left. I mean, up until recently, at least electorally, we had Bernie Sanders for that. In terms of elections, it looks like that's probably not going to be the future. Are there any individuals that leap out to you as potential leaders for the movement in the future, or should we even be focused on that? Does it matter if we have sort of a figurehead or a leader?
I think the latter of what you just said. I think it's really important that we recognize that take it from Bernie, right? Not me, us was his whole campaign slogan. Mm-hmm. And that's because our collective solidarity as people to be able to overcome the immense challenges that are faced before us with this pandemic, and obviously defeating Donald Trump and just the institutional barriers that we as progressives face in the Democratic Party. It's really important that we recognize that in this moment, there are a new generation of leaders like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, like Rashida Tlaib, Ayanna Pressley, and Bernie and others that are really trying to, or show that there is this that they're more reflective of where the rest of the country is at, and that's going to require all of us to not just be so focused on a figurehead, but really in this awesome power that we've all been able to create, and Bernie has been able to channel through a presidential campaign, and now I know he's going to be able to channel it through how we respond to this pandemic, and obviously enacting a progressive agenda over the years.
For more political news breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/The Damage Report. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.